I'm back with another episode of the GCN Tech Clinic where I help answer your problems, questions and queries relating to the bike itself. And well, with no further ado, let's crack on, shall we, and see what this week's questions are. Right, first up is from Shasha Levi, who says, what tyres can I fit on my rim? I can fit a 25mm and 23mm easily, but I want to fit on those wheels 44mm gravel tyres. Will it work? Well, first up, without actually knowing what rims you've got, I don't know. But by saying you can fit 23s and 25s doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to fit those 44mm on there. The reason being, I know it doesn't sound a lot, that's only 19mm wider than the 25, but believe me, that's a big volume difference between the two tyres. And you've also got to think about putting an inner tube inside of the space between obviously the rim and the tyre itself. And that's not necessarily going to be that easy because sometimes it can be a real pain even for 23s or 25mm tyres. Also consider your frame and forks and how much clearance you're going to have there because once you put on the 44mm tyre, that is very likely it's going to be rubbing on a frame that's designed for only up to say 25 or 28mm tyres. Best bit of advice I can offer you is actually to pop down to your local bike shop, get them to have a look and they can advise you on what is the widest width tyre that you could fit on there. Good luck. Now James Stadden would like to know, would a Shimano Ultegra CS HG800 1134 11-speed cassette be compatible with either a 105 or Ultegra long cage derailleur? Right, now it seems at the moment there is so much interest in that 1134 cassette since I mentioned it a few weeks back. Firstly, let me just actually clear up. There are various ways of hacking and bodging rear derailleurs to fit with basically those bigger cassettes that we, or some of us at least, want to have on our bikes. Basically, I wouldn't recommend actually doing that myself because if the product's not fit for purpose, then it's not fit for purpose for a reason. However, the rear derailleur that would work is the Shimano R8000 GS. That actually goes up to a 34 tooth capacity on the rear, maybe even 36, but I know for a fact it works with a 34. So get yourself one of those and you'll be good to go. I know that people are going to say in the comments down below, yeah, but you could try this, you could try that. You could, but do you really want to risk it? Because if that derailleur does go wrong by bodging something, yeah, it could lend you with, quite a hefty repair bill, couldn't it? That's not ideal. Next up is a question from Alexander Wendelbo, who asks, how tight should he tighten his cleats? They saw a video with Si and he used a 5 Nm key, but that's not enough for the cleat to stay in place. It's on a pair of Bontrager shoes and pedals of Shimano Tiagra. That's a great question. Good thing is you are using the correct torque setting, so 5 Nm. Shimano actually recommend between 5 and 6, so you're fine there. Now what I think is that your cleat bolts are actually possibly a little bit too long, and that where they're fitting into that threaded section within the sole of the shoe, that's carry on going and it's reaching maybe like the inside of the sole and it's not able to go any further basically. So the cleat is just wobbling on the sole of the shoe. Now you could possibly try a couple of washers underneath the head of the bolt, so in between the head of the bolt and the cleat, or alternatively try and find some shorter screws. Let me know how you get on though. Jolly Giant has a problem. They've got Ultegra 5239 and an 1128 cassette with a medium cage on their bike at the moment. The gearing is fine most of the time as they live in Norfolk, which is very flat. They're doing some hilly rides soon and they want to know if they can change the rear cassette for an 1132 or 34 without changing the rear mech or chain. Now this one, it all depends really on which exact model of that Shimano rear derailleur you've got. But from memory, a great deal of the ones that have GS on them will actually accommodate that 32 sprocket that you've got there. Now if you do want a 34, then actually you are going to need the new Shimano Ultegra R8000 rear derailleur, for example, which handles the 34 tooth sprocket. As for a new chain, yeah, you are going to need one because obviously it has to take quite a bit more of the cassette to operate. basically I'd leave it on there anyway, because most of the time there in Norfolk, you're going to be probably in the 11-tooth sprocket, in the gutter, in those flatlands. But in all seriousness, yeah, you can get it and just leave it on there. Next up, Paolo Filho would like to know, is there any problem in hanging vertically a bike equipped with hydraulic brakes? Is it better to hang with the front or the back wheel? Now, as far as I'm aware, there's no problem. I've hung my bike from its front wheel for many years actually with hydraulic disc brakes. Sometimes, however, people have done it the other way around, or in fact upside down for a short period of time, and normally within a few pumps of the brakes they get working again properly. The reason being sometimes some air can actually just get trapped and not give you good braking. Another tip, which I've heard some of my friends do, I've never tried this though, is actually when they hang their bikes up, they use some elastic bands to pull the levers into position, so as if you're locking on the brakes, and then they hang them up. That way, there's nothing moving around in the system. Give that a go, possibly. But don't blame me, blame my friends. Right, now we've got a question from Max Skeller, who says, I have just got a new bike with SRAM Red E-Tap. Very nice. But I can't get it shifting perfectly by the micro adjustments. They've heard about the B-tension screw. What does it do, and can it solve my problem? Right, well the B-tension screw adjusts the distance between your upper pulley wheel and the lowest sprocket on the rear cassette. So that's one with the most teeth. The reason it does that is to give you a better shifting. So take for instance your SRAM Red E-Tap. You want that distance between the upper pulley wheel and that biggest cassette sprocket to be between 6 and 8 millimeters for best shifting. Any bigger than that, you're going to get some slow shifting. So check that that distance is between 6 and 8. And then finally, make sure that your derailleur hanger is also straight, and also the derailleur hanger screws are done up to their correct taut settings. Now, it doesn't have to be really, really tight because those bolts are very, very fragile, but that's probably the best bits of advice I can give you right now. Let me know how you get on with that one. Now, Bjarne Kedelson wants to know, is it possible to use SRAM levers with Shimano rim brakes? Yes, it is. But the problem being is they're not designed for one another. The reason being is that SRAM has a different pull ratio to Shimano and vice versa. So it's not going to give you the same braking power. Now, if you think about it, when we ride along, we don't actually brake that much. So you might be thinking, well, that's fine, that's okay. But the problem is when we do brake, we want it to be perfect. So don't take the risk. Besides, why would you want to anyway? Keep it nice and matchy. Now, Samuel's Psycho Cycling, I better get this one right, has a creak on their bike that they figured out is from the rear wheel. It's not related to cadence or power, and when they took the cassette off, they noticed the Freehub had some pretty bad teeth marks. What could be causing the creaking? Now, first up, it's quite common actually for Freehubs to get a little bit scored from a cassette because they're made out of quite soft aluminium normally to keep them quite light. You can get a file and gently get rid of those burrs, but don't go overboard whatever you do because you want to have those splines still in place so your cassette is held in the correct place. As for the creaks, check out your skewers, so make sure that they're greased all the way along the spindle of it, as well as the threads, everything like that. And then also make sure the axle is greased all the way around where it goes into the dropout, because believe me, that can quite often be a cause of it. Now, you do mention in there you've already lubricated where the spokes cross, possibly give the nipples a little bit of lubricant too. If you do though, make sure it doesn't go anywhere near the actual braking surface on those rims. And finally, when you're putting that cassette back on, just apply a light coat of grease on there too. That does help. Let me know how you get on, because those creaks can be an absolute pain. And personally, I want to know if you've solved this or not. Okay, James B has got himself into a bit of trouble here, it sounds like. My shifting has become hard. I may have internally crossed cables when replacing them. Is there an easy way to see if this is so? They're a nightmare to reroute. Yeah, believe me, some internal cables can be an absolute nightmare, and I wouldn't want to be in your situation. However, you are in that situation, so let's try and solve this for you. Now, what you could do is take out the bottom bracket, shine a torch, and actually try and see if you can see up that down tube and see if the cables are crossed anywhere down in the bottom bracket area. Alternatively, take out the forks and do exactly the same. So look through the head tube into the down tube, see if you can see them crossing. That really is my only bit of advice, I'm afraid, because without X-ray vision, we can't do it. The best thing for you to do, really, get electronic gears, you'll never have that problem again. Mekong Velo wants to know, what do I think about using a Roadlink, which is a rear derailleur hanger extension, to basically be able to use a bigger size cassette instead of buying a different rear derailleur? Loads of riders in Thailand use them for the mountains. Are they safe? Are there any other drawbacks? Right, so basically by doing this, you're adding another piece into the mix from your derailleur hanger, so an extension. I've never used one. I have known people use them, and with success, and it does sound like quite a good idea really. The only drawbacks I could possibly think of is that by adding in another link to it, you might not be getting super accurate gear shifts or very fast. The best thing for you to do though, Mekong Velo, is actually ask other riders who you've seen in Thailand using them and see what problems, if there are any, they've encountered. And let us all know, because I'm intrigued. Okay, the final question this week is from Peter Lee, who says, how do people set the front derailleur height for a non-circular front chainring? Are there any problems with the chain falling off more frequently compared to a circular one? Now, just so everyone is aware, you can get non-round chain rings. So the idea behind them is that you eliminate, or as much as possible, the dead spot from your pedal stroke, so that really at your strongest part of the stroke, you're able to deliver more power. As for actually setting up the front derailleur, you want it to be so that when the chainring is in its highest point, so when it's as far up the seat tube as possible, or as close to the derailleur as possible, it's probably 2 millimeters, the actual outer cage from that chainring. I would suggest, if you're using a cabled setup, to use a fresh cable. Reason being, it's likely you're going to be adjusting and micro-adjusting that derailleur a little bit just to get it spot on, because sometimes they can be a little bit temperamental. But when you have set it up, and I've set up quite a few of these, it's absolutely fine. There is no difference basically in the quality of shifting. As for the chain coming off, I've never actually used a set myself, but there are riders out there in the World Tour who do use it, and they're not having any problems, so it must be okay. Right, I hope you've enjoyed this visit into the Tech Clinic once again. And remember to leave me your technical problems, questions and queries in the comment section down below, or on all forms of social media using the hashtag AskGCNTech. Now remember as well to give this video a big like and a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, all of that. And also remember to check out the GCN shop at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com. And for another great video, click just down here for the latest GCN Tech Show.